Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by regulatorwatch.com. It's happening all across the country. Canadians who had previously quit smoking thanks to vaping have returned to smoking in alarming numbers. It's a result of an unprecedented campaign by anti-vaping opponents to poison the public perception of vaping, and it's working. Joining us today on a special edition of RegWatch Live is Darryl Tempest and Michael Geoghegan. There you guys. Sorry about that. There's the right button. So Darryl, as you probably all know, is the executive director and lead advocate at the Canadian Vaping Association. You might not know Michael Geoghegan. He's the government relations expert for BC, and he's also the BC spokesperson for the CVA. What is very interesting about Mike is that he was the guest on our very second RegWatch episode that was about vaping, and that was 4 years ago, almost to the month. And that was about the BC regulations that were proposed at that time. Mike, Darryl, thanks for joining us on RegWatch.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, no, you bet. So look, Darryl, let's start first with you. Things have been brutal across Canada as a result of the so-called vaping-related lung illness. Fill us in on what the CVA is seeing across the country, and then drive us into what's happening in BC with the proposed Flavour ban.
Well, I think I would agree with you that these unknown lung illnesses that have been coming up in the United States have really confused what vaping is and what vaping isn't. Since the inception of the CVA, what we've really tried to do is define what vaping is, right? So vaping is made up of 4 elements. What we're seeing out of the US, which has really confused Canadians at a large part, is that they've defined vaping as this complete unknown, where it's start to bring in items such as THC, vitamin E, and all these illicit products that have really caused a lot of challenges in terms of Canadians who are honestly concerned. Right?
So that's really what's happened here is that conflation of vaping into the THC. And if you look at the track record, just even in the media, you don't see that connection happening until roughly around last spring. So it is literally a 2019 kind of a phenomenon.
Well, not only that, I mean, one of the messages that we've been trying to get across throughout the country in every interview that we've done is that if you look at vaping, it has over a decade of use, right, with none of these lung illnesses that have been attributed to it. And now suddenly, within the confines of the United States, where public health is giving the information that really is important for Canadians and Americans in this particular context to understand what vaping is and what vaping isn't. So if you look back in the history of our industry, one of the things that we tried to stay away from was this context of e-cigarettes. There's nothing about vaping that would relate to e-cigarettes because cigarettes have thousands of chemicals and are extremely harmful. Vaping for e-liquid is an important definition that I think that is critical for not only Canadians to understand, but also lawmakers. So as you relate to, and we start to talk about where flavors have been miscast, and where the CVA has really started to try to dig into is that if you look at the conditions, we're going to look at 3 buckets here tonight, right? One is lung illness and where it's coming from. 2 is youth uptake and how to address it. And then the third one is how important flavors are for adults to have a successful transition to vaping, which is at least 95% less harmful than smoking, according to the Royal College of Physicians.
So let's get a quick overview of what's happening in the country. And let's not sugarcoat it. From what I understand, sales have been down in some places 60%. We're talking about actual vapors walking into stores saying that, you know what, after all of this information that has come out in the last 6 weeks, if I have to roll the dice on my health, I'm going to choose smoking over vaping.
Well, that's one part of where we're warning governments in terms of the public health impact. So it's not only about smoking, as we were talking about flavoring and what's happening in BC. Is that if you look at what public health risk is, there's three parts to this, right? The first part is we're going to have people return to smoking, and we know what smoking does. It kills in 1 in 2 users long term, right? The second part is for every day that, or every 4 days that you smoke, you lose 1 day of your life. The third part is if we start to take away flavors from users who have made the successful transition to a far less harmful alternative, then what's going to happen is they're going to start looking to the black market as opposed to returning to smoking. And as they go to that platform, then we're going to see the incidence of lung illness that we've seen in the States start to ramp up as they get products from a verifiable source. Right? So that's one of the things that we're really trying to not only talk to government about, but also public health.
How has public health, and that's really Health Canada on the national scale, we're going to be quickly talking about provincial here in a moment. What's your assessment in terms of how Health Canada has been handling this issue? And for the general public or for the public health professionals, or the anti-vaping opponents, let me be more precise, their concern is that Health Canada is not doing enough. But I would assume that your perspective is a bit different.
Well, of course, my perspective is different. If you look at the vaping regulations as they exist in Canada, we have some of the strongest legislation and regulation as it relates to vaping on the planet. Right? If you look at COP7 and what happened there, where there was a ton of pressure for countries to sign off on banning vaping completely, Canada came home and said, "No, we're going to make a decision and we're going to make it choice for Canadians." Right? If we look at what we're looking for from Health Canada moving forward, is that the critical element here is the relative risk statements, right? And the fact is, we need to define vaping because one of the issues that we found in North America is that vaping has been completely blown up into this to this realm where you can't tell the difference between what nicotine e-liquid vaping is and what these illicit black market products are. So even if in the interviews and all the conversations we've had with media outlets and newspapers across the country is that even if you say e-liquid nicotine, which has 4 elements, as we all know, which is PG, VG, nicotine, and natural flavoring, they won't carry that part. What they say is vaping. So cannabis vaping and THC cards versus the harm reduction tool that we have. So the key message that we've been trying to give to media is that this is an unprecedented harm opportunity in Canada to address the largest killer of Canadians, right? In addition to, if you're a non-vapor and if you're a non-smoker, why should I care? Here's the reason you should care. 1, taxation is far less than the healthcare costs, $16 billion to $6 billion for non-smokers, non-vapors. So this addresses economic pillars. 2, cigarette butts are the most littered product in this country. So we're talking about our waterways, we're talking about our landfills, we're talking about our streets and the places that our kids play. And then lastly, right, is that if we're going to address a sustainable healthcare system, it is the number one cost that we find across this country to address the number one killer and the cause of cancer and the cause of disease.
So let me ask you this, because this is really the crux of it moving into action when government is taking action. So we have BC, and here in BC, we have a opposition MLA, so not in government, BC Liberal Party, MLA Todd Stone, last year during the initial part of actually pretty early, last year in April of 2018, So that's, let me make sure I'm really clear about this. This is before, months before former Commissioner Scott Gottlieb announced that teen vaping was an epidemic. So his move on this was really early. And if you look at it across all of North America, it's got to be one of the earliest, if not the first, in terms of an actual real proposed ban. So, and that came out of, and I know it's a private member's bill, and everybody says that, well, those are not likely to pass. But, let's dive into that for a second. Michael, let me ask you this. You've been here on the ground in BC, so carve out who the players are, explain that. So, we've got MLA Todd Stone, we have the health minister who's NDP, and that's Adrian Dix. Give us some understanding of that.
Okay, so what's happened is I actually met the other day with MLA Todd Stone right after question period, where in fact the issue of vaping had come up, and I had a very good, I have to say, positive conversation with Todd, and certainly one of the things he's focused on the flavor bans because he feels it's difficult to try and discern like what's a flavor that's geared towards adults versus a flavor that's geared toward kids. I think there is room to broadly define it in such a way that you can't be referencing confectionaries and other things that are obviously, like geared towards kids things like gummy bears and things like that. Um, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind that as the British government is now invested in, and their studies have proven, is that vaping is a tremendously positive way to get a large number of smokers to quit smoking tobacco and to take up vaping, and thus save lives and save billions of public health care dollars. So we think that adults who are trying to make this transition, they are still able to access certain flavors. And Todd, to his credit, he brought up two competing examples. He said, Mike, I had a constituent in tears, a mother, because her 13-year-old daughter had started vaping. And what was the flavor that had hooked her? Mango. And he said, on the other hand, I have another constituent. He used to be a 2-pack-a-day smoker. And he was able to quit that habit and become and gets his nicotine via vaping, and his go-to flavor is mango. And so he recognizes the contradiction in it. And I think the message that I try to impress upon Todd is that if we're serious about wanting to keep kids from getting addicted to nicotine through vaping, then it is absolutely insane to be selling these products in convenience stores and gas stations. Where you can have, there's the chocolate bars, there's the chips, and there's some vaping stuff. The other thing is that we have unregulated equipment, unregulated liquids coming in from God knows where, China, Pakistan, who knows, and being sold there. What we obviously think is a sane approach and responsible approach is that first and foremost, wherever you're retailing these vaping products, that it is done at a dedicated retail outlet that is adults only, 19 years of age and older. The other thing is that the equipment that is being sold is regulated, that the liquids that are being sold are regulated and inspected. And the other thing that we impressed upon Todd, as well as later Minister of Health officials, is that we see an effort in terms of hooking kids where they're putting out vaping stuff that is of high nicotine value. So kids are getting a head rush. It gets them addicted right away to the nicotine, and we think that's reprehensible. And so one of the things that we're certainly talking about is there being limits on nicotine levels. And again, with the idea is we're not trying to get people hooked on nicotine. We're trying to get cigarette smokers to quit and switch to vaping because it is 95% less toxic. We're trying to save the taxpayer money, and we're trying to save lives here.
So, I mean, all very, very solid arguments to be made to government. The issue will be whether or not they listen. I just want to shoot over here to the website again and just make sure you guys can see it. Here again is Mr. Todd Stone, MLA Todd Stone. And the way that we framed it in just, a short little bit when we posted the bill was BC's Free Enterprise Party delivers death blow to vaping. And that might sound a little, no, it's actually about right. It would be a death blow to vaping. I'll get you to both to respond to that in a second. But the BC Liberal MLA for Kamloops South Thompson delivered a death blow to vaping in the province with the tabling of Bill M210. Nobody cares about the numbers. It was Bill 174 there, Mike, back 4 years ago. And now it's this is basically an amendment to that legislation. And what kills me here is just the making of social capital that's going on with a bill like this. And you mentioned, Mike, that he's had some mothers coming to him crying. Well, of course he has. Crying, hysterical adults are exactly what's caused this issue. Governments reacting the way that they are is because of hysterical adults crying their heads off instead of taking any responsibility as a parent. Nobody talks about responsibility. The entire continent of coverage over these last 2 months. No discussion of responsibility. The entire epidemic conversation for 18 months. Never has there been shaming of parents. Never there's been shaming of kids. Nothing. It's the vaping's fault. Anyhow, let me just go back over it. So this is a simple line that's in this amendment. One line: a person must not sell or offer to sell flavored vapor products. That's it. If you look at the amendment, it is about as simple, stark as you can get. So, Mike, is there room here to move? What have you heard from MLA Stone with regards to this? I mean, it's not even mentioning tobacco flavors or menthol flavors, nothing like that.
Yeah, I know he does draw a pretty harsh line in the sand, but certainly in our discussions we talk specifically about tobacco flavors and menthol flavors and those sort of things. And I first of all, we are expecting legislation to come down probably within the next few weeks from the Ministry of Health, the Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, and we're expecting that there will be some kind of limiting of nicotine levels, and we are expecting that we hope there'll be some limiting of locations, right? Whether it'll be, I mean, like I say, dedicated adult-only shops. That's certainly what we recommendation. There might be a thing where maybe, I don't know, pharmacies are also allowed to sell this stuff. But the most important thing is that the equipment that is being sold is regulated and safe, and the liquids are regulated, inspected, and safe. And the other thing is that when you go into that store and you're a pack-a-day smoker, you've read the science, you've gotten away from the North American hysteria, and you've looked at all the scientific studies coming out of Britain and how the British government is completely behind and very positive about vaping as an exit strategy from smoking. So you come into the shop. Well, you've got equipment. And for people, it could be a little bit intimidating. It's okay. Here, what this does, and where do the batteries go, and all that stuff. So it's a person taking them through how to use the equipment and how to use the equipment safely. And the other thing is, if you have, lithium batteries are dangerous, right? You ever watched a Tesla burn? You can look it up on YouTube. I mean, it's a scary thing. So lithium batteries can catch fire and they can explode. So you don't want lithium batteries floating around in your pockets with your keys. That having been said, most people are responsible in the way they treat lithium-powered electronic equipment. But on the other hand, when you've got a shoddy, uninspected products coming out of China or wherever, tragedy can ensue, right? And we've seen cases of that. So it's not just people getting sick because there's God knows what liquids breathing into their lungs, but also cases where people have been brutally disfigured because these devices have exploded. Because again, it's not the regulated stuff that has ever caused a problem. It's this stuff coming in. And so the other thing is that you talked about responsibility a little while ago. Well, government has a responsibility to protect the consumer. So I think regulation along the lines of what we at the CDA have proposed, I think government and the public will be well served by it if they go that route.
Darryl, let me ask you a question, and it's a follow-up to what Mike was just saying. And you kind of added some stuff earlier. Is the CVA not concerned with the fact that in your effort to get regulators on board with securing open system segment and access, so access and choice for adults. Is there any concern, though, that there could be collateral damage when you're talking about batteries exploding, when you're talking about bad juice coming in from China, and all of these kinds of things, and not knowing what's in mystery juice? It sounds to me that that could just be playing right into the hands of opponents, and their messaging is much the same.
Well, I think what you're looking at, and it's an education opportunity for us for sure, right? And what you're talking about there is really separate things. So if you look at things like battery safety, that was an issue that we faced in the past. As you're looking at more closed systems where manufacturers are now building products where the batteries aren't separate, you don't have that with the change in the pocket and some of those issues we faced in the past. And if you look at, I remember 3 years ago when I started, or 4 years ago when I started, a popcorn lung was a big thing. You heard about popcorn lung all over the place. And it took not only us to educate legislators, but it was Health Canada that came out and said popcorn lung is not a thing. Right?
Let me ask you. Let me ask you this. You just mentioned Health Canada came out and said that. Has Health Canada done anything to get out to the public and defend vaping, a product that they legalized for consumers, and basically put Health Canada's stamp on it that it was safe? Has there been any effort by public health to come out and assure the public that legal nicotine devices that are bought in Canada are safe?
Public health and Health Canada very much are two separate things. So if you look at most of the public health groups that are reporting these, they report provincially. So if you look at Ontario, for example, it was the health minister in Ontario that asked for these cases to be reported, right? We just went through a 40-day election. Health Canada itself did not have a health minister of the day that could really give direction as they were through the process of the election. I think what my expectation, and I think what the expectation of all Canadians should be, is leadership. I think that's what BC has called for federal regulations to better define what vaping is and what vaping isn't. Right? So in our view, in the CVA's view, is that vaping is nicotine e-liquid. It's not cannabis. It's not THC carts. So when we call on the government, federally, and the governments provincially, and our territory partners, which I don't think we talk about enough in their territory governments, is that you're looking at really 4 simple elements. 1, adult-only access. These products should be available in an adult-only environment. So if you look at where provinces don't have advertising bans, we're seeing these in convenience stores and gas stations and brightly lit signs. I just did a release where there was a balloon for a company that sells exclusively through convenience stores and gas stations, where it was right above my children's school, right, with a big balloon saying "Vape me," essentially. Which is completely inappropriate, right? So a national ban on brand advertising, right? We need to be able to communicate to Canadians that this is good for adult smokers to transition to a far less harmful alternative, which is good for smokers and for their families. I was a smoker. My transition means that I have 4 children under the age of 7. I'll be able to see their weddings. I'll be able to live a long life, as opposed to understanding that for every 4 days I smoke, I lose 1 day of my life. That's my commitment to my children, right? That's a commitment from a lot of smokers to their children. These are compelling, right? Verifying age of majority, right? Any kid with can get a prepaid credit card and buy these products, including THC cards and everything they want to internationally, where they don't even have to go through a vape shop, a convenience store, a gas station, or any sort of gate, right? Our goal as a vaping industry, right, whether you're a CVA member, non-CVA member, how this industry came together, right? We had an industry that was based up mostly of ex-smokers who were looking for a way to save their lives. And they took action before legislation. They took action before regulation to ensure that children did not get access to this product. Where did we see the youth uptake? We saw the youth uptake after the federal legislation, where channels opened up, and you saw the opportunity for others who don't understand the technology, who don't understand that this is built for adults only smokers. So my question is, and I would actually advise and challenge public lawmakers to walk into any store, any convenience store or gas station, in any riding in this country, and ask for a package of cigarettes in a convenience store, and see if the person at the counter even talks to them about harm reduction, even talks to them about the opportunity to reduce their harm.
Well, I mean, that's definitely not going to happen. I mean, cigarettes are still at least, what, 35, 40% of the take for convenience stores?
Yeah, well, even besides the economics that are against it, here's where I challenge, and I've reached out to Rob Cunningham, and I've reached out to others from Heart and Stroke to Cancer Society, to everyone else, to have this conversation directly, because here's the thing: flavors very much have been miscasted as the villain in this story. The villain absolutely is high nicotine concentrations that are going to grab not just youth, but any user who's like, hey, it's a Friday night, I'm gonna have a glass of wine, I'm gonna try a vape. And at 50 milligram, which is very misleading, because if you look at the packaging from these pod systems that are available in convenience store and gas station, they do it by percentage. So it's only 5%. Not understanding it's 58 milligrams, right?
I've got Darryl. Just I'm going to throw this up on the screen here for our viewers and for you too as well. Is a slide from your guys' presentation, CVA's presentation, where it's just talking about your 4 key proposals. And Aaron, I just want to make sure you've seen that and our audience does too. Please continue.
So what we want to do is that if we look at what's affecting in the U.S., the CDC has made it quite clear, right, that of the verified cases, we're looking at over 70% that are illicit, either THC cards, cannabis, products that shouldn't be available to them. And as we move forward with this, after over a decade of use and an estimated 40 million users of this product, we have never had a lung issue. So why now? Why in the States? Why in these specific regions within the United States? The CDC understands where the illicit product line is starting to run from, and what these pods look like as they start to push themselves out across a region. It comes from illicit drugs, whether it's diseases, everything else. We understand what that looks like from a public health risk. So you can't have something that has been available globally for over a decade, and then suddenly, under these preconditions of being regulated, which is something that most Canadians and certainly the media doesn't understand, and legislated in this country, that these are manufacturers that are producing products. And if we go to things like flavor bans, what we're going to do is we're going to either push people back to smoking, which we know kills 1 and 2, long term, which we know is every 4 days that person smokes, they're going to lose a day from their family, from their children, from their ability to be able to live their lives, right, and get onto the healthcare system, and this is another big fear that we have at the CVA, is that they're going to say, I don't want to die, I don't want to go back to smoking, so if I need the flavors that are important to me as a user, I'm going to start moving myself to the black market. And we saw what happened in the US with the black market. If you're not using products from a quality manufacturer and a quality retailer who can help detail you, it's a public health risk.
Totally it is. It seems to me that it's absolute insanity to even meet them on the battleground of flavors. It's insane. Adults, there's no actual scientific proof that a particular flavor is more appealing to a young person as opposed to an adult. And really, this is just complete total misdirection here.
Well, Brent, if you don't mind, I'll jump in, and I would agree with you fundamentally. So if you look at the fact that flavors have been around for over a decade and youth uptake was not an issue, right? In 2018, what changed in the marketplace, right? One, the chance.
Whoa. For our viewers, just so we make sure there's no dog whistles happening here or silent, references. We're talking about Juul entering into the market and the other products by Big Vape.
Well, it's so okay. So yes, absolutely. But I think if you take it and expand it a little bit from there, right? So any brand can come into the market now. So Juul and Vipe, and we can deal with those. Really is a marketing issue as opposed to them being the key culprits. I think where I'm trying to go here is that if you look at what's attracting youth, and I think this is what's important for regulators, right? Is one is promotion that is in front of them at all times, above the candy bar, in the convenience stores, places where children congregate. The second issue here is that the high nicotine levels that were never meant for children, were never meant for non-smokers, are creating a next generation of Canadians addicted to nicotine. What the industry has always stood for, right, is to be able to get those addicted to nicotine into a platform that was going to allow them to choose a less harmful platform, reduce their risk by at least 95%, not 95%, at least 95%. And moving forward, right, is that we're not saying that that pod systems and manufacturers don't have a role in harm reduction. What we're saying is we don't need it above the candy bars. We don't need the signs in the windows as the kids walk in. We don't need, like we've seen in Ontario, Christmas tree type of displays. And we certainly don't need balloons, hot air balloons, going over our children's schools. And if you look at that from its fundamental perspective, and we'll go back to this hot air balloon because it's a big issue with me, is that what happens? The parents start going into the schools saying that these are being marketed to my children, right? They start getting concerned about their kids taking on nicotine, which they should. This product fundamentally was meant for smokers who want to reduce their harm. That's why it was invented. That's why the industry grew organically. And if you go back to why Canada took the brave step after COP7 was to say that this product belongs in Canada. This should be available to Canadian citizens. It was a brave step by Health Canada, regardless of the pressure that they took from the World Health Organization.
Now, I do agree with you on that, but you went so far down that road that I must, as a duty to my own editorial position that I've had for 4 years now, one of the very first questions that I had for CVA, for people at CVA, because we first started in Canada, right? So, I'd hear all the time from shop owners, if all we do is just get every smoker in Canada over to vaping, and then, if they decide to, zero down on their nic and then eventually quit, and if that's it, and we just get everyone, I'll be happy to close my business, and that'll be it. And, as the incredulous, 25-year journalist at the time, now almost 30 years, I go, well, wait a minute. You're building a multi-billion-dollar a year business, not just here, North America, worldwide, 40 million vapors already right now, and then you've got adults that could make a choice to decide to pick up a nicotine habit, because you can choose to pick up a caffeine habit. In Canada, you can choose to pick up a legal cannabis habit. And so this constant demonization about nicotine, and I'm concerned sometimes, I understand why you have to do it, but I'm concerned sometimes about why the industry gets on board with that so much because, in the end, I think that if there had been a full-throated defense of recreational use of nicotine 12 years ago, 10 years ago, potentially it could have been a different, ball game. And, toss that back at you because, in 25 years from now, if there's still a vaping industry, which I'm assuming there would be, thriving and growing, every regulator and every anti-vaping opponent in public health is thinking, well, of course, there's going to be new customers because, new people will be coming in. And that seems to me to be the battle here so much is they want to...
Do you know where the battle is, Brent? Is that for every big tobacco company that's going to market and try to get their products into people's hands, the vaping industry globally is going to stand there and say that we will make sure that you have a less harmful alternative.
But do you catch them before they start smoking is the issue, right? So, like, if you catch them before they start smoking, then you're committing the heresy of, getting somebody who would never use nicotine on nicotine through vaping. So that's the question, right? Is the whole goal is to grab them so in a way, vaping is in business with big tobacco because in 25 years from now, the new clients will come from big tobacco's new generation of smokers. So I'm just throwing that out there because I'm thinking like the anti-vaping people who despise capitalism, despise the fact that this industry has grown like it has, and they see it as just as evil, right? So if you don't embrace adults choosing for nicotine, then you're basically building your business on new smokers.
So I'll challenge your premise. I don't think you're thinking like the anti-vaping people. I think you're thinking more as the way that big tobacco would think about it. So big tobacco would say, this is a way for me to addict a whole new generation to nicotine. That is not how the industry grew and thrived, right? People in youth, and give me 1 sec here on this one, Brent, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Go ahead.
Youth experimentation is going to happen for the rest of the time, whether it's from alcohol, whether it's from recreational drugs, whether it's from nicotine. This has been an issue that hasn't come up since vaping has been a thing over a decade. This has been an issue that has since my dad was chasing me around my farmyard, telling me not to do these things, right? So where I'm going with this one is that if you look at how the industry was brought together, right? It was mostly entrepreneurs who came together as one common goal, which was there were smokers that were trying to address the combustible tobacco component that was killing them. And then they had an opportunity to share that with other people that were also smoking. So what my answer is to the Cancer Society, lung, heart, and stroke is that if your mandate is to stop 45,000 Canadians from dying a year, if your mandate is to reduce the health burden, if your mandate is to make sustainable health care in this country a priority, that this is the pathway with a high success rate, which NRT could never address. I can't be there, and a shop owner can't be there, and a manufacturer can't be there when a young person or an adult first picks up a cigarette. What we can do is when they realize that this product is killing them, we can be there to educate them and help them along their pathway to save their lives.
Well, I agree with that. Mike, let's throw a question at you here, and thank you for that, Darryl. We're going to take a quick look here at an article, Mike, and I'm hoping you can see that okay. This is from the Vancouver Sun, updated on September 30th. BC teen vaping plan coming within the month, says Minister. There are roughly 90,000 businesses in BC currently selling e-cigarettes and vape products, including local corner stores, convenience stores, and gas stations. They do not require a license, and health inspectors are stretched thin to catch anyone selling illegally to minors. 90,000 businesses in BC selling e-cigarettes. That seems to me, Mike, to be an awfully, awfully large number.
Yeah, it's insane. And that's the message that we've had. We've also provided briefing materials to the minister's office. And in fact, I was on the phone with the Associate Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Health today and discussing it. And that's one of the key things we have is that if you're serious about keeping kids from getting addicted to nicotine, then you cannot have convenience stores and gas stations selling this stuff. And if you're serious about protecting consumer health, then it has to be regulated equipment, regulated and inspected liquids, and that way we can maximize and adult only retail, and I think at that point, the only concern would be are there enough dedicated adult only retail to serve every community? There are, I think, about 150 throughout the province, both in towns and whatnot. But it's interesting to see what will happen. But I think the other thing I wanted to talk about was that with regards to this lung disease, one of the things that's come up, and this is why I emphasize it has to be inspected. Vitamin E acetate, pesticides, metals in cheap cartridges, unregulated cutting agents, moldy cannabis, because keep in mind most of the stuff has been associated with cannabis and not nicotine, untested product, and under education of what was being consumed and the equipment being used. And people are just labeling that all under, it's vaping, right? And like I say, I think the solutions are quite frankly straightforward. And so, we're keeping our fingers crossed that the government is listening to our message. We'll find out in a few weeks.
So what could we expect here, Mike? Or would they actually pass MLA Stone's amendments, or is this going to be something that's driven solely by the BC NDP government?
No, well, certainly the questions that have been asked in question period and the private members bill, et cetera, that's all going to go into the mix, and as well as the feedback, quite frankly, we're providing to the ministry and to the minister's office. So at the end of the day, they're going to come out with their regulations. We hope it's along the lines of what we're recommending. And like I said, we'll find out in a few weeks.
So there was an issue that, and correct me if I'm wrong, and just kind of refresh my memory. During the height of the lung illness hysteria, what did the health minister say? Didn't he make some public statements that were quite off of reality?
Yeah, I'm just trying to recall the statement. I'm drawing a blank right now. Does anyone else have it?
Darryl, are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Well, there's a few statements. So I'm sorry, Brent. I'm not sure which one you're referring to exactly.
Well, you know what? If you guys don't have it at top of mind and I don't have it at top of mind, then we'll move on. That's just the best way to go. Darryl,
go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Darryl, because just hearing Mike mention, they're going to be coming out with the regulations.
Yeah.
And you've said the same thing. I want to kind of drag this conversation back to a kind of a national level in the sense that we just went through 5 years of, through pre-HESA, then the HESA, then the legislation gets tabled, and then that was a year and a half almost, maybe 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. It goes through Parliament, it goes through the Senate, it comes back, it gets voted on, it gets passed, regulatory frameworks get made, the bill becomes law, it gets royal assent. I mean, we're talking about a real process here. And it was literally became law in May of 2018. And by September, Dr. David Hammond from University of Waterloo is already screaming that things are, going crazy here in Canada. And by November, information's already being shared with Health Canada. And already in December, major stories are coming out, CBC, CTV, and everything, saying the epidemic of teen vaping has hit Canada. And in January, we're getting regulatory consultations dropped. The ink wasn't even dry on the legislation, So I'm just concerned that there's been a breach of process, and in trust, because I trust Health Canada as a Canadian. I trust my government, even though I'm not a big Liberal fan, unlike you, but that's okay. Congratulations on the election. But I trust government. And so I trust when they go through this process and they put their stamp of approval on a product, they're going to be right there defending it. And sure, the lung illness is recently, I take your point on the election, but where were they during the epidemic? You know?
No, okay. So you covered three parts in sort of one question. So let's break
do that.
Okay, yes. So one, we need to hold public health accountable. Right? They have led way more than what they should have. So this is something we have to address at a provincial level, right? So vaping and vaping to talk about products that have made people sick without talking about the products that made people sick, without diving into the issues and specifically talking about Dr. Mackey and his inability to identify the products that should be recalled. And then later, after all the fanfare and all the publicity that he tried to drive, in the meantime, quietly whispering, "Oh yeah, by the way, it was a product that came from outside of the country. We don't know what it is not only inappropriate, it puts lives at risk. Dr. Mackey is putting lives at risk. And by perpetuating the misconceptions, by perpetuating what I would describe as, right, as it relates to vaping is everything, as opposed to what we have clearly defined, which is we're not e-cigarettes, there is no such thing. Either you're a cigarette or you're not. Vaping is vaping, nicotine liquid. Period. And stop. So then, Brent, you have a follow-up, or I'll go into the federal?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we really catch this, because you went there strongly on Dr. Mackey and his statements and his impact on Canada, and he's cost lives. Do you think, or at least perpetuated illness?
For sure, and we called out Dr. Mackey for sure on this, and so is many in the industry, right? Like if you look at the vaping industry at its nature, you name me another business outside of the healthcare realm, the pure healthcare realm, that has saved thousands of people. Name me one other outside of the vaping industry that's been able to accomplish this goal, that's been able to address the largest killer. And so we hear Trudeau talking about, we're going to take the guns off the street. How many gun deaths are there attributed in this nation versus how many people die of health-related issues due to smoking? We talk about dealing with the epidemic. Do you know what the real health crisis is in this country? The health crisis is combustible tobacco. And then if you look at when we're trying to address the issue, when we look at advertising, these are tobacco companies with vape brands. So whether you talk about Juul, talk about Vype, or any of these other organizations, they're tobacco companies with vape brands. They're not trying to address what the real problem is here. Right, is that we're not trying to create the next generation of Canadians addicted to nicotine. What this has to be is in an environment for adults who are looking for a less harmful alternative. We don't need brands. We don't need balloons. We don't need signs as we drive into Toronto or Montreal, or, well, not Quebec because it's banned and good for them. But to any of these other environments where it's like, do this, do that. And the argument that I've gotten a lot was, people don't know enough about vaping. I'll tell you what, if you're a Canadian in this country and over the past 4 weeks, you've had a conversation about vaping at your dinner table in the last 4 to 6 months, there isn't a person in this country who doesn't know what vaping is. Our job is, with lawmakers, with those in the media, and specifically with Canadians that are smoking, that vaping is PG, VG, nicotine, and natural flavoring. That's it. When you look at youth uptake, it had to do with marketing. If
How
you
much?
look at,
Let me ask you about that
yeah,
because I agree with you. Obviously, that marketing works. Otherwise, billions and billions of dollars a year wouldn't be spent on marketing. I mean, really mean that. I mean, people shouldn't be shocked to find out that advertising works. But I wonder though, because often it has seemed to me that the best advertising to teens for, say, the Juul product came from the media and from, anti-vaping pressure groups. I mean, and Kellyanne Forbes was on our show last night, and she said that she's never seen a vaping company ever, take these great looking shots of, teens, using devices. That's all coming from the opponents. And the complete hysteria talking, I mean, there's got to be at least some part of the news coverage and the whole reaction.
Brent, I'll take it further than that. You've got your internet influencers. You got youth taking information very different than a couple of old guys like us, right? So if you, not calling you old, Brent,
Oh, I'm old. It's okay.
but if you look at how these products were marketed prior, so in the US, one of the biggest issues that they had is they hadn't taken the steps that Health Canada has taken. They haven't regulated and legislated their market yet. So that we're being subject to the ills that another country, which is being attacked by illicit products, that are being attacked by THC products, that make for good news stories. So no matter how many times we take the media back to 95% at least safer than combustible tobacco, they're like, well, what about the illnesses in the U.S.? And you say like illicit THC cards, vitamin E, and then there is no pickup in those stories. And even worse is that there's almost seems to be a refusal from the media to address that nicotine liquid is different from THC liquid. So if I talk to my friends across the country when it relates to their interactions, and I'm sure Mike will understand this one, is that every week MLAs, MPPs, and MPs have families, concerned moms and dads walking to the office of their elected officials and saying, for the love of God, stop this. And they're saying, for the love of God, stop this, because their kids are getting hold of vapes, which they shouldn't, right? They think it's because of mango. It's not because of mango, Brent. It's because 58 milligrams is enough to addict a full-grown adult. Could you imagine what it would do with a 16 or 17-year-old, right? We need to be able to control the product and be the gatekeeper. That is absolutely the point that we're trying to get to, right? Is that we target the 5 million Canadians that smoke. And you asked me a question, and I can answer your question. You said, "Oh my God, you know what? The vaping industry says all we're going to do is address the 5 million smokers, and then we're happy to shut our doors." You know what? Big Tobacco is not shutting down. I'll tell you what. When Big Tobacco shuts its door and it stops trying to shove cigarettes down the throat of everyone across this country, then we'll talk to our membership about standing up for Canadians and offering them an opportunity to save their lives. I'm happy to have that conversation with British Tobacco or any other tobacco company. They want to shut down. We're more than happy to do it at the same time.
So let me ask you this question, and we're getting, just so everybody knows, and before I do that, actually, we're at 8:05, so we're about an hour mark, and so we got about another 15 minutes left for us to go before we wrap up. And I want to take this opportunity, as I always do, to thank our supporters, because without them, we cannot do what we're doing. And CVA has been a great supporter over the years, and thank you very much, and plenty of CVA member companies too as well. So, but the key thing for us here is to really say thanks to Premium Labs and Sammy Fogg. Premium Labs is fantastic. Sammy was our first supporter. We would not be on the air with vaping if it wasn't for Premium Labs and Sammy, and fantastic support. And so all over, I mean, for a good year and a bit, it was fantastic. Oh, and for our American viewers, Sammy was our first supporter that I said to him, I said, look, we've got to start covering American pieces, American issues. And Sam was like, well, yeah, but I don't sell down there. And I go, yeah, but everything that happens in the U.S. spills into Canada. And unless we address the misinformation going on in the U.S., we're not going to be able to win in any battles here in Canada. And I mean, that just keeps proving itself over and over and over again. And so a big thanks to Sammy, and then Mark and everybody over at Stealth. Man, great, good company, just came on and started supporting us and has got great things to say, not only about what our mission is in terms of our coverage, but also about our viewers, which is fantastic. They've really got our eye on our viewers, and we really appreciate that. So for the rest of you, oh, and just to make sure, a couple of logos I have not got up yet, but we've got some of our monthly rock stars that have come on here in our post-Hysteria coverage. Valheim Vapes and New Beginnings Vapes out of the U.S., oh, no, actually, New Beginnings, I think that's actually East Coast, Canada. And then, of course, Flavour Crafters. John was one of our early supporters, too, as well. Jonathan Marshall at Flavour Crafters. And Wendy at Stinky Canuck. Oh, my God. Starlight, that's from the U.S. And, of course, Vape Meat. And then some of our other one-time heroes. And then our brand support legacy group, which you can see here. And, again, without any of these companies, and you can see at least 30 or 35, I didn't do a count, have all been there for you, our viewers. Otherwise, we would not have been able to do what we do without them. All right, guys. So that's, go to support.regulatorwatch.com and dig into that pocket, find a few dollars, and kick that over to RegWatch. We need the help, and you'll feel better for it. All right, gentlemen, so let's start to move into wrapping up phase. And I've saved a tough one, Darryl, for you, because I know I've only thrown you softballs so far tonight. You've mentioned big tobacco several times, just in your last thing, throwing the gauntlet down with them. They have organized into an advocacy group called VITA, that's in Canada, that's just starting to come out. How is that going to work with CVA in terms of two advocacy groups of some weight operating in this market?
Well, I think from a principal point of view, we would. I don't know much about VITA or what they stand for or what they're trying to do. I think that if you look at CVA from March this year, right, addressing youth uptake. One of the things that we gave 3 prescriptive answers to the ministry in terms of how to address this, right? Adult-only access, brand advertising needs to be restricted, and double verified ID from when you order and when you get delivery. If I look at the crisis, right? And if you look at what's happened in the last 6 weeks or the last 8 weeks, I ask you this, right? Has the big tobacco brands changed any behavior? Have they shut down the marketing? Are they putting out balloons above schools here in Hamilton, above my children? Do you see the signs that in every convenience store here in Ontario? So I think regulators see this because we're not the only ones who go to the convenience stores. We're not the only ones who go to the gas stations. We're not the only ones who see this marketing. Lawmakers see it, right? They also have children. They also have teenagers. So what I say to VITA has a great group of people who were at the start of this industry. Ask your membership. Ask your board, ask your founders, if we're going to address the concerns that Canadians from coast to coast have given us, right? Flavors have been around since the inception of vape, with no youth uptake. Next to none. Was it the channel that opened up in 2018 that allowed these products to be available among thousands of retailers across this country with little to no education? Or was it flavors? Flavors have been miscasted and they've never been attributed to youth uptake. Nicotine levels as an entry point. So if you look at the retailers, what did we traditionally see from 2015 to 2017? 3 nic, 6, and 12. That was the vast majority of the industry. Since the entry point of big tobacco with vape brands, because these aren't vaping companies, this is big tobacco with vape brands. That's when we started to see the high nic, 45s, 58, salts, things that get people truly addicted to nicotine. We are a harm reduction product. That's what the industry started with. That's what the industry thrived with. That's what government supported. And when in COP7, when the World Health Organization was concerned about this, this is the solution that we were trying to create. 2018, youth uptake.
Got it. And that's a strong message, Darryl. And I think it resonates too. I mean, my job's to push because I have you here. So there's things that I know that part of our viewership, wants some answers from CVA, and to hear these topics discussed. I mean, if it's not on this show, it's not on any show. So I do appreciate your passion and the directness that you've had in terms of answering our questions. I'm going to ask you one more question after I go back to Mike here for a second, because I want to bring us into BC for one last moment. Michael, so when we were kind of figuring out some of the numbers, some of the people in the industry here in BC and I were, chit-chatting this, 150 vape stores, more or less, figuring out what the average take is a day coming in sales, number of employees, and so forth. And we kind of looked at that and went, geez, it looks like that there's probably $82 million in revenue a year. And that may or may not be right, but it kind of made sense in terms of discussions. That's what the BC business would be. And when we, backed out the numbers, maybe 1,500 employees, that kind of thing, and their families, which is a lot, and about 68,000 smokers, or vapors, in BC. And what's going to happen in your mind, Mike? I mean, are the people you're talking to, is the health minister and is MLA Stone, are they even evaluating the issue here? Because if it's only just about flavors and nicotine, is it not about the business, the taxes, the employment, and 68,000 vapors? If just a small percentage of them, let's say 10%, you're looking at 6,800 people going back to smoking. I mean, that's a disaster.
Absolutely, and that's a disaster for those 68,000 people. That's a disaster for the taxpayer in our healthcare system, because that's a huge cost. Our public healthcare system. I mean, as a taxpayer, thank someone when you see them vaping, because if they were smoking cigarettes, that's more money out the window for in terms of healthcare. Certainly, that is one of the positives of this, is that given the 4 simple ingredients that go into proper vaping liquids, there's a real ability to, and there has developed a cottage industry of different companies are producing different liquids with different flavors and whatever, and they take great pride in the purity of it, because as has been pointed out, this is an industry that comes from a tradition of wanting to quit cigarette smoking, that hates big tobacco, sees them as the Antichrist, and rightly so, and certainly sees these big companies that they've either acquired or started, and very much in keeping with that, and their insidious marketing and the high nicotine. This is in the corporate world or what have you. This is as good close as you can get between good versus evil. There's not a lot of gray here. And so that having been said, there is this wonderful opportunity for where you can have, these companies again producing product that's regulated and inspected in order to ensure the safety to the consumer. Happening in different communities in BC or even being marketed to other provinces and what have you. And yes, as you pointed out, jobs. And then, of course, there's those retailing jobs that go along with it. I'd much rather see the manufacturing and retailing jobs here than God knows what coming over from China or being sent via, UPS or what have you.
So, Michael, you've been in the room. You're the one talking to both government and MLA Stone. Are flavors going to be secured in BC?
I think we still have a fight ahead of us, but I think they understand, and I've certainly encouraged them to, look at the British example, look at the scientific studies, look at the economics in terms of their national healthcare system. The fact that in Britain you are allowed flavors, you don't want to drive 68,000 people back to being tobacco smokers because they're going to pay a tremendous cost in terms of the healthcare bill.
You're concerned, though. So let's just make sure.
I am not in. Yeah, I am concerned, but I am cautiously optimistic that the first thing they'll look at is restrictions in terms of who can retail it, and hopefully restrictions around advertising, etc., and also nicotine levels. I'm hoping that in terms of the regulations we're going to see in a few weeks' time, that's where the focus is going to be.
So are vapors in British Columbia and the shop owners that their business relies on the vapor, right? So the symbiotic relationship there, are there sorry, just got a message that apparently you guys are echoing, and if that's the case, we've like an hour and a bit in here, so that's a little bit late for me to find that out. I'll have to look at it later. So this symbiotic relationship between the vapors in British Columbia and the vape shop owners, are they together doing enough to raise alarm, to reach out to government, to do all the things that they need to do to activate to help support the lobbying effort? And let me just say that I've been in several shops since the alarm should have been raised or did get raised over this in the last month. I've been to several shops that are kind of my home shops, and I found, and no offense to anybody, but I found a lack of concern. Like there really was a complacency about it. Like, nah, they're not going to get rid of flavors. We'll just short fill. Yeah.
Well, I would certainly encourage any vaping shop owner out there to join the CBA. Certainly, anyone that's doing manufacturing of the liquids here in Canada to join the CBA. And yeah, if you snooze, we all lose, right? This is not a time to be complacent. It's a time to be pointing out and emphasizing the benefits of this as a harm reduction platform, and let's not wreck it. And also, this is something I said when I did an interview on CKNW on this matter, is that let's keep in mind that in terms of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, big tobacco and big pharma have a lot of influence. And they have even more influence in terms of the FDA's political masters, members of Congress, etc. And so, we're not. And so, for me, I look to again the scientific studies and the research done in the United Kingdom, and where they come out, and they clearly have a pro-vaping strategy because they recognize that they're going to save lives and they're going to save a fortune in terms of healthcare dollars by getting smokers to quit and take up vaping.
Well, that's great. And then, Mike, just last for you is that can they get a hold of you, or what can they do if they want to get active?
Well, like I say, I go to the CBA.org website. I believe there's information on there in terms of how to get involved and how to get active. I can be reached. My Twitter handle is at BC lobbyist. In any event, I go to the CBA.org website.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Michael. And then, Darryl, there's just two follow-ups in the last to tie things up. One is a bit more technical specific, and I felt that it's better for you. The discussion around North America has always been pointing to UK, for instance, as if a flavor ban happens, then the short fill option is always there. And for our viewers who don't know what that is, which I find that hard to believe, but possibly, right, is that if the issue is you can't have nicotine flavored vaping products, or however it's worded, if you separate the flavor from the rest of the stuff, then you can short fill it. So short filling is your bottle. You put most of the juice without the flavoring and including its nicotine, I guess, however you want to do that. And then it's not quite full, and then you sell the flavoring separate, and then the user can just mix the two. And how viable is that for Canada? What's the discussion on that? Because Plan B discussions have been going on in the US now for about a year, and I don't hear Plan B discussions in Canada. And it seems to me that if BC flavor ban happens, and also too, we've got the issues in the East you can speak about too if you can in your last answer here. So what are the options on Plan B? So it's not just BC that this flavor ban issue is happening, is it?
No, but I think that if we go back and we think about what you said there was what, in your estimation, 68,000 vapors in BC.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
that was the scratch pad work, yeah.
Okay, so what I heard was there was 34,000 people who will avoid death. That's what I heard. So before I start thinking about Plan B or options or what we need to do, I think that that's the core message. BC has 34,000 people who will not die of combustible tobacco. So why don't we keep our focus on that, right? Youth should not have this product. It is our mission in life. And we've been doing this since March of this year to address youth uptake. We didn't ignore it. We didn't pretend it wasn't happening. We said, this is an issue. The data is a problem. But more importantly, 34,000 people in British Columbia will not die because of vaping. That is the message to legislatures. That is the message in Alberta. That's the message in Atlantic Canada. So for everyone that talks about flavors, we know that the key about flavors is this. Okay? As an adult, flavors are important, not just from enjoying the product or anything else, but it brings you back to memories. Any vapor will tell you. They started vaping, they quit smoking, they went back to vaping 4 weeks or 5 weeks later and said, Jesus, this cigarette tastes like garbage, because they taste like death. So I think my mission, Mike's mission, our mission across the nation is to really talk about if we can avoid 34,000 people dying in the province of British Columbia, why wouldn't we be getting behind what that is? Because that's a lot different than this mysterious lung illness in the United States. So that's my answer to that, Brent.
Well, that's a great answer. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for coming on the show tonight. And it was pretty much, flying by the seat of our pants. And I hope our viewers got a lot out of it. And everybody, you can go to Canadian Vaping Association.org, and that's the CVA's URL. And again, Mike is at BC Lobbyist, and that's his Twitter handle that he's known by. Thanks very much, gentlemen. And for the rest of you guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. And that's it for this edition of RegWatch. Don't forget to go to support.regulatorwatch.com and explore all the ways that you can help us do what we do. Thanks a lot, and vape 'em if you got 'em.